You're scrolling Zillow at midnight after Isha and every single house in your zip code that doesn't look like it's about to fall down costs $500,000. The kitchen has laminate countertops from 2003, the carpet is beige, there's fake wood paneling in the basement, and the listing agent has the audacity to call it a starter home in a Muslim-friendly suburb. Meanwhile, you're sitting there doing mental math on your salary, wondering if you missed a raise or whether the entire housing market has collectively lost its mind, or whether you're going to have to ask the imam if it's actually okay to use a halal mortgage at all when the underlying numbers are this insane. Spoiler alert. It's not you, it's the math, and the math is absolutely brutal. My name is Omar, and today we're going to do something that real estate agents and frankly some halal mortgage salespeople hate. We're going to calculate who can actually afford a $500,000 house in 2026 using a halal financing structure. Not who Guidance Residential or UIF or Lariba will technically approve, but who can legitimately afford it without turning their family's life into a financial stress simulator and burning through their Hajj fund, their Zakat reserve, and their kids' Islamic school tuition in the process. Because there's a massive difference between qualifying for a Diminishing Musharaka contract and actually being able to sleep at night after you sign at closing. Hit subscribe if you want to keep running the real math instead of the brochure math. Let's start with the uncomfortable reality. In dozens of US markets right now, $500,000 is the baseline. That's not getting you a mansion, that's getting you a 1,200 square foot box with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard the size of a prayer mat, and a 15-minute drive to the nearest masjid. In Denver, Austin, anywhere within commuting distance of a major metro with a Muslim community, $500,000 is what regular Muslim families are expected to somehow come up with for regular houses. The median household income in America is around $84,000. According to the ISPU American Muslim Poll 2025, US Muslim incomes are bimodal, with 37% of Muslim households earning under $30,000 a year compared to 26% of the general public, and a smaller upper tier earning well above the median. So we're asking the average Muslim family to afford homes that cost roughly 6 times their annual income. If that ratio sounds insane to you, congratulations, you're paying attention. But everyone keeps telling you it's possible. The halal mortgage broker says you're approved. Your uncle bought his house in 1998 for $140,000. Some brother on Instagram is flipping houses with no money down and a Sharia-compliant rehab loan. So what's the problem? The problem is that everyone is lying to you about what affordable actually means inside the halal frame. Let's start with the down payment because that's where most Muslim dreams go to die. The traditional rule was 20% down on a $500,000 house. That's $100,000 cash. Let me say that again. $100,000. The median savings account in America has around $8,000. According to Federal Reserve and Empower data, the median emergency savings sits closer to $600, and 47% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency from cash. So you're not just a little short. You're $92,000 short on the down payment alone, and roughly 99% short on the buffer most financial planners would tell you to have on top of it. And before you say you'll just save it, let's run that math. If you're earning $84,000 a year and you somehow save 10% of your gross income, which almost no US household actually does, you're putting away $8,400 a year. At that pace, it takes you 12 years to save the down payment, assuming halal home prices don't move, which they will. Most halal mortgage providers don't offer 5% or 10% down at the same rate as 20% down anyway. They typically prefer 20%, and below that, the all-in profit equivalent rate gets noticeably worse. So the people stretching to buy with less down end up paying more in monthly profit. That's structurally similar to PMI in conventional financing, except instead of an insurance line item, it shows up as a higher rent component baked into your monthly. Either way, you're paying extra every month for the crime of not being wealthy enough to put 20% down on a starter house. Now let's talk about the actual monthly. Say you put down 10%, which is $50,000 you somehow scraped together. That leaves you with a $450,000 financed amount. At a halal equivalent profit rate near 6.6% on a diminishing Musharaka contract, your monthly principal and rent component is going to land around $2,870. That's just the housing payment itself. That number doesn't include a single other thing you actually need to live in the house. Let's add property taxes. Depending on where you live, you're looking at anywhere from $4,000 to $8,000 a year, which works out to roughly $500 a month if we're being conservative. Then there's homeowners insurance, which has skyrocketed in the past few years thanks to climate-driven losses showing up everywhere. You're looking at another $250 to $350 a month depending on your zip code and whether your house sits in a flood zone, fire zone, or tornado alley. Then there's maintenance, the thing everyone forgets about until the water heater explodes at 11 p.m. on a Sunday between Maghrib and Isha. The general rule is to budget 1% of the home's value a year for maintenance and repairs. On a $500,000 house, that's $5,000 a year, or about $416 a month. Don't forget the Guidance Residential LLC maintenance fee, which currently runs $18.75 to $25 a month per their published rates for the co-ownership structure. Roll all of it together. Mortgage component $2,870. Property taxes $500, insurance $300, maintenance reserve $416, LLC fee $25. Your total monthly housing cost is now sitting at roughly $4,111 a month. And that's assuming nothing breaks. You don't need a new roof, the HOA doesn't decide to repave the entire street, and you don't have to suddenly fly to Karachi for a janazah. Here's where it gets really interesting. Financial planners say you shouldn't spend more than 28% of your gross monthly income on housing. Banks and halal financiers will approve you if your total debt-to-income ratio is under about 43%. Let's reverse engineer this. If you're spending $4,111 a month on housing and that represents 28% of your income, you need to be earning roughly $176,000 a year. If we use the more lenient 43% rule, you still need to be pulling in around $115,000. And here's the punchline. Only about 10% to 20% of US households earn $150,000 or more. Cross that with the ISPU income data, and you start to realize that the Muslim household that can actually buy a $500,000 home without financial gymnastics is a small minority of our community. The remaining majority either can't or shouldn't, but they're being told they should anyway because the wrapper is halal and the anti-network already saw the closing photos. This isn't an opinion. This is the math being cruel inside a halal frame, but you're thinking, brothers are still buying these houses. Who are they? Some are software engineers and physicians with dual incomes pushing past $300,000. Some are families pooling resources with parents or in-laws in genuine multi-generational arrangements that the Sunnah actually encourages. Some are stretching themselves so thin that one layoff or one medical bill would collapse the entire household. Let me show you what that actually looks like when you run the numbers on a real Muslim household trying to make this work. Meet a household we'll call the Khan family. Two working professionals pulling a combined $160,000 a year in a major metro. That puts them well above the median, solidly upper middle class. They should be comfortable. Right, let's watch what happens when they buy that $500,000 house using a diminishing Musharaka contract. First, their gross of $160,000 sounds impressive until the IRS shows up. After federal taxes, state taxes, FICA, and a modest 401k contribution, ideally into a self-directed brokerage account if HR will give them one, they're taking home around $9,500 a month. That's the actual money to live on. Subtract the $4,111 monthly housing cost. They're left with $5,389 for everything else in their lives. Now layer the Muslim-specific line items most financial calculators ignore. 2 car payments because nothing in suburbia is walkable to the masjid. There goes $750. Car insurance for 2 vehicles, another $250. Gas because the closest halal butcher is 25 minutes away, $300. Student loans because they needed those degrees to qualify for the salary that qualified them for the mortgage. Conservatively, $600. Health insurance premiums their employers don't fully cover, $400. Groceries for a family that's trying to eat halal and reasonably healthy, where the Zabiha certified premium meaningfully bumps the cost, $1,000 if they're careful. Utilities for the bigger house, $450. Sunday or weekday Islamic school for 2 kids because they made the naya for it before they bought the home, $600 a month for both, and that's a discount school. We're now at $1,039 remaining. We haven't touched clothing for Eid, replacement clothes for kids who keep growing, weekend activities, car repairs, medical co-pays, the obligatory cousins walema where you're expected to bring a respectable cash gift, the auntie's birthday Hajj contribution everyone in the family chips in for, or the psychological need to occasionally take the family out for a meal that isn't reheated rice. Now layer the obligations the brochure didn't mention at all. Zakat reserve. If their zakatable wealth above debts crosses the silver-based nisab threshold, currently around $1,495 according to SAPA USA and the American Muslim Community Foundation 2026 figures, and stays there for 1 full lunar year, they owe 2.5% annually. Sadaqah, which they were brought up to give monthly out of conviction, not obligation. The Hajj fund, because they made the intention years ago and haven't dropped it. They were aiming for a $500 a month contribution to that, add another $300 to $500 a month across all 3. Now they're at maybe $539 left. This household is spending 43% of their take-home pay on housing alone. Not 28%, not 35%, closer to half. Their actual margin to absorb anything unexpected is essentially zero. And these aren't irresponsible people. They're not buying jet skis or vacationing in Dubai. They're trying to live in a house the market told them was normal for a Muslim family that did things the right way. Here's what that actually feels like daily. It feels like checking your bank account before buying groceries on the way home from Maghrib at the masjid. It feels like saying no to your daughter's Islamic school field trip because that $35 might be needed if the brakes start grinding. It feels like lying awake at 2 a.m. doing mental math about whether you can pay Zakat this Ramadan or whether you'll have to defer it because the home's eaten everything liquid. It feels like being one unexpected expense away from disaster at all times. The HVAC dies, that's $5,000 you don't have. Someone rear-ends you. The deductible is $1,000 going on a credit card you swore you'd never use. Your kid needs braces. You're financing dental work like it's a car. This is the reality for Muslim households earning $160,000 trying to own a $500,000 home through a halal product. Now imagine what it looks like for the household making $120,000 or $100,000, or given the ISPU data on our community, the family at or under the median. A median income buying a $500,000 house through a halal financing structure isn't tight. It's not even stretching. It's mathematical fantasy. It's not just hard. It's the kind of stretch that systematically forces a family to compromise on the obligations that actually anchor their deen. Hajj gets pushed, Zakat gets contested, Islamic school gets downgraded to a Sunday-only program. The very obligations the halal wrapper was supposed to protect end up squeezed out by the mortgage that was supposed to honor them. But here's what makes this truly insidious. The housing market doesn't care about these numbers. Sellers list at $500,000 because that's what comparable houses sold for. Halal financiers approve buyers at 43% debt to income because technically the contract won't default immediately. Real estate agents inside the Muslim community encourage buyers to stretch because their commission depends on closing the deal, and frankly, because they genuinely believe homeownership is the universal right move for everyone. Nobody in the transaction has any incentive to tell you that you're about to financially drown yourself in a Sharia-compliant pool. The system is designed to get you into the house, not to ensure you can comfortably afford it long-term while still meeting your obligations as a Muslim. Once you're in, once you've signed and moved your prayer rugs, you're trapped. You can't decide 6 months later that this was a mistake and walk away without losing your down payment, hurting your credit, and signaling something to the anti-network that you cannot unsignal. So families stay. They stay in homes they can't actually afford, working jobs they hate because they can't risk any income disruption, slowly watching their savings evaporate, wondering why they feel so stressed when they're supposedly living the American Muslim dream. Let me tell you what the harsh truth sounds like. For probably 70% to 80% of US Muslim households, a $500,000 home is not affordable, not sustainably, not without accepting a level of financial precariousness and obligation skipping that would have been considered reckless a generation ago in our community. This isn't about personal failure. This isn't about not working hard enough or not being financially savvy. This is about the housing market that has completely disconnected from income reality, layered on top of an Islamic finance product market that has marketed itself as the safe halal option without doing the affordability math for the buyer. Home prices have increased roughly 400% since 1990. Median household income is up about 180% in the same period. The math doesn't work. It cannot work. And yet we keep pretending it does because the wrapper says halal and the brochure has a scholar's name on it. We keep telling people that home ownership is essential for building Muslim generational wealth, which is partially true, but ignores the part where you have to survive the contract first. We keep perpetuating the myth that if you just budget better, skip the spontaneous biryani delivery on Friday night, and pick up a side hustle, you can make it happen. You cannot budget your way out of a structural affordability crisis. You cannot side hustle your way into a 20% down payment when the rent for a comparable place is already eating 35% of your take-home. You can't manifest a lower profit rate through positive thinking or through stacking duas. What you can do is understand the actual numbers so you can make an informed decision and then take that decision to a scholar you trust who knows your situation. Maybe that decision is to keep renting, invest a spread in Sharia-screened equities through Wahed or a self-directed account, and revisit in 3 years. Scholars, including Joe Bradford and the AMJA Imams who reviewed US Islamic finance contracts in 2014, have explicitly written about renting under necessity as a legitimate option for Muslims who can't responsibly afford a halal mortgage product. Maybe the decision is to look at a $350,000 home in a smaller market with a serviceable masjid instead of a $500,000 home in a marquee suburb. Maybe it's to acknowledge that homeownership in your current market simply isn't viable right now, halal or otherwise, and that's okay because here's what nobody tells you. There is no prize for buying a house you can't afford. There is no trophy for being house poor with a halal contract. The stress of barely making your monthly will erase any pride you felt the day you got the keys. The real question isn't whether you can technically get approved by Guidance, UIF, or whatever the post-merger combined platform is calling itself in 2026. The real question is whether owning that house will actually improve your family's life and your ability to meet your obligations, or whether it will just transfer your money to a financier while you stress about property taxes and skip Zakat. So what does this mean for you practically? Let's be direct. If you're looking at the $500,000 house right now and your household income is anywhere south of $140,000, you need to stop. Just stop. You're about to make a decision that will dominate the next decade of your family's life and quietly compromise the obligations the halal label was supposed to protect. I don't care what the halal mortgage advisor at the Masjid Open House said you're approved for. I don't care what your real estate agent said is normal in your market. I don't care that your friends made it work or claim they did. The numbers are the numbers, and they don't care about your feelings or your Pinterest-ready open kitchen dreams. Here's what happens when you ignore this. Plenty of brothers do. You stretch. You convince yourself it'll be fine. Maybe you're betting on a future raise, maybe a side income, maybe you're just tired of renting and you want this so badly you've stopped thinking. So you buy. Month 1, you make the payment. It's tight, but you did it. Month 2, same thing. You're cutting back. You skip the new aid close. Month 4, your car needs new brakes. That's $800 you didn't budget for. Credit card. Month 7. The AC dies in July. The repair quote is $3,500. You don't have it. You finance. Month 9. Your spouse's hours get cut. Suddenly you're $600 short every month. The emergency fund you were going to build never happened because there was nothing left to save. Ramadan rolls around and you're lying to yourself about whether you really have to pay Zakat this year because you don't have the cash to pay cleanly. This is the reality of being house poor inside a halal contract. You own the home technically, the financier owns it for the next 30 years, but you can't afford to live in it comfortably, can't afford to maintain it properly, and can't afford the obligations the rapper was supposed to honor. You become a prisoner in your own home, working to pay for walls you're too stressed to appreciate. So let me give you permission to do something radical. You can choose not to play this game. You can run the real numbers, factor in Zakat, Hajj, Sadaqah, Islamic school, and the screened equity portfolio you should already be building, and decide that a $500,000 home is not worth sacrificing your financial stability and your deen-aligned obligations. You can keep renting, you can save aggressively in a Sharia screened account, ride out a market correction, and revisit. You can look at cheaper markets, smaller homes, or honest multi-generational living arrangements. As always, the math is the math. The scholarly views on stretching for a halal mortgage versus renting under necessity genuinely differ, and your final ruling on murabaha versus diminishing musharaka versus renting forever has to come from a scholar you trust who knows your actual numbers. Run them honestly, factor in everything, and if the math doesn't work, walk away. There's no shame in saying this doesn't make sense for me right now. There is no trophy for buying a house that makes you and your family miserable. The real win is making decisions based on math rather than emotion, on your actual numbers rather than the anti-network's expectations, and on your obligations as a Muslim rather than the brochure's marketing copy. That's how you avoid becoming the next cautionary tale in someone else's khutbah about overstretching for the dream of halal homeownership.